data is killing your enjoyment of running, get rid of the data, go and enjoy the running.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to another episode of the 33 Fuel podcast. My name is Warren. I'll be your host for this show, and our guest today is running journalist par excellence, Kieran Alger. Now, if you're a runner, chances are you might be looking for an edge, an advantage, something to get you a little quicker, something to get over that injury, something to inspire you, delight you, something to make your miles go by quicker, make them longer, whatever it may be. Well, Kieran is the man who has all of the answers for you, because if there is a piece of running technology, equipment or gear in the last 10 years, he has tested it. He's put it through his miles, out on the trail, out on the road, out on the treadmill, wherever it may be, to bring the unvarnished truth to the world. So today on this episode, we are primarily going to be diving into Mr. Kieran Alger's crystal ball as he takes a gaze at where the future could be taking us in running technology, and also sifts the great from the good from the bad in the latest things that are available to help you run on the market today. As well as that, through his own hard yards at the coalface over many, many years, Kieran brings up a number of other brilliant subjects that I think you're going to really enjoy, including the subject of over-tracking. Technology is great, but don't go too far with it. You'll find out how to identify this and how to manage it if you suspect that you may have a problem. And as well as that, what about your running age? If you've ever wondered what that is and you want to calculate yours, Kieran's going to be breaking that one down for you as well. So look, absolutely tons to unpack over the next 60 minutes or so. We'll be getting into that any minute now, but before that, a quick word from our sponsors. Because if you are looking for the finest, the greatest, all-natural sports nutrition out there, at great value delivered directly to your door, of course there is only one place you should ever be going, and that is 33fuel.com. So do make sure you get there, but not before you have enjoyed this show with Kieran Alger. Kieran Alger, thank you very much for coming to join me on the podcast. Great to have you here.
Thanks for having me on. It's nice to see you.
You too. It's been too long, but I think the world is getting a little more free, and hopefully, who knows, we might actually even be able to go for a run soon.
Yeah, we'll be able to sort of hang out. I mean, it's a long time since you arrived at my door clutching product to send me off to the Marathon des Sables back in 2015. Yeah, feels like we've been through a lot since then.
There's been a lot going on, and we've even had a brilliantly long catch up and preamble before all of this. So warmed up. In fact, we needed a break before we got started, eh?
Yeah.
So look, with your background in depth through running and everything else that you do, you have quite the overview of the world of running and trends within the sport for the consumer, especially in terms of equipment, tech, advantages, and all those other things. So I wondered if you could, rather than me absolutely murdering your CV, missing key points, do you want to give everyone a quick overview of kind of your background, what brings you to where you are today, and where all the expertise sort of comes from in your background?
Yeah, whistle stop tour. I mean, I was a footballer to start with, and
of course,
I always say this, but the thing that running was the bit of football training that I absolutely hated. I always say this when I come on. It's like when the trainer used to come out and say, "You can put the balls away tonight, lads." My heart used to sink. All you're doing doggies up and down. And then at some point in London, I stopped playing football because it was basically looking at a ball going over in the sky in midfield on a Sunday morning on Hackney Marshes, and I did a 10K around London. I think it was like the British 10K or the Essex 10K. And I remember I ran past Big Ben, sun was shining as the bell chimed, lots of crowds, and I just thought this is a much better way to spend a Sunday morning than being kicked lumps out of on a football pitch somewhere. I came immediately back, signed up for a half marathon, which I did, came back from the half marathon, signed up for a full marathon. And at the same time, my journalism career had just started to dovetail. I was working for a magazine called T3, which is a consumer tech title. And the wearable technology kind of explosion was just starting to happen. I was the only person who really did running at the time. So they gave me all the wearables to test. So I'd go out and be testing the latest kind of Garmin or what have you. And it just dovetailed perfectly. I got the running habit in a big way. And that was probably about 10 years ago now. And since then, I sort of my passion and my work and my interests all collided, and I've spent the last 10 years really delving right into everything from kind of wearable technology through fueling, through kind of health and fitness, where all these things kind of collide. And as part of my job, I now test everything from fueling products through to shorts and apparel, trainers, all those kind of things. So I'm now basically have the really kind of enviable job of going out and running for a living and then writing about how I find the products, which is, it's a very happy place to be. But it's, and I guess in the journey I've then, where that really sort of took me through all kinds of different things. I essentially went looking for adventure. So I've done about 43 marathons. I've done a bunch of ultras, and I put myself, like most people who sort of find running, they'll start to sort of look for bigger and different and more adventurous ways to kind of tick the boxes. So I've done many different ultras, many different challenges, and all the time I'm always looking for the way to be the best runner that I can be, or get the most enjoyment out of being out there on the trails or on the roads that I can be. So my career now kind of reflects my hobby in a big way, and that means, I get to have this sort of wonderful overview of all the trends and look at what's good, what's working, what's coming down the line.
Very, very nice place to be, which brings us amazingly to, I think we might call this Kieran Alger's crystal ball. Okay, so where is let's do a bit of future gazing here. What are the big trends or even the hits? And I'm always entertained with the misses, where someone has come up with brand new wonderful ideas, and then technology in the world very inconsiderately goes in a totally opposite direction. I'm thinking, Blu-ray disc of running, whatever that may be. Where do you see the biggest developments coming that are going to help people get more out of their sport, their running, enjoy it more? What are the key trends for you that are coming down the pipeline right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a big thing that there's an enormous kind of, I guess, exposure of people getting involved in mass participation events. People going doing lots of marathons and going out and doing and racing basically week in, week out, getting onto that kind of tip. And one of the things, it's not necessarily a technological thing, but I definitely feel like more people are moving to, there's lots more people doing FKTs, fastest known times, lots more people just going out and finding adventure on a weekend on their own and setting their own goals and challenges that might be about, being out for longer stints or whatever, rather than actually chasing finish lines. That's one of the areas that I think is big. And I guess over the years, most of us run with a running watch or some piece of running technology on our wrist. We're all kind of guilty of perhaps over tracking. And again, I can feel I get a sense of people will still continue to sort of do this, still be looking at their sort of key data, but also starting to understand that actually it's sort of helpful to look beyond the data and get a nice balance between getting deep into your numbers when it's right, but not obsessing about them too much, and being able to sort of be free to run and enjoy. And I guess that trend, generally speaking, those two things come together when you're talking about just going out and getting enjoyment out of the act of running, or enjoyment, good for mental health, all of those things, rather than it necessarily being about hitting a certain time or reaching a certain finish line. So that's one of the trends. On the flip side of that, though, one of the things that I'm really fascinated about at the moment is going very deep into, I've been sort of testing a piece of technology called it's real-time blood glucose monitoring. So essentially what you're doing, it's technology that was taken from, it's actually created for type 1 diabetics to be able to monitor their blood sugar levels in real time, so that they know how to respond with the correct amount of insulin and intake of fuel. But a couple of companies have taken this on and put it into the running fitness performance space. So there's a company called Super Sapiens, and then there's another company called Levels. You're essentially wearing a small kind of skin-worn monitor on your arm, and it's got wireless connectivity, so you can tap your phone on it at any point and see what your current blood sugar levels are, or blood glucose levels are. Now, why is that interesting?
You've been stroking your arm there. Are you wearing it now?
Yeah, I've not got it on now. I've got one here, which is going to go on soon. They're quite expensive, Warren, I'm not going to lie. So I don't use it all the time, but I do use it to sort of maybe calibrate my thinking around what my diet might be or what I'm going to eat. And so there's two moments here really you can look at with this. You can look at how you fuel for performance, and you can also look at how you're eating for your general lifestyle and health. Now, so for example, during a marathon, you'll be able to see, let's say I went out and I decided I was going to maybe get into fasted running. I can see what happens to my blood glucose levels on an early morning where I haven't eaten and how I feel in relation to what that kind of trajectory is like. I can see actually which kind of products might spike my blood sugar more than others as well in terms of fueling. I can see how, if I go out and I've eaten before, I can see how my particular choice of breakfast might have affected my levels, and then correlate that with how I feel when I'm actually running. So you've got to do both things. You have to actually feel, be in touch with the physical feeling as well as looking at the data afterwards. But then what I'm really interested in as well is beyond this is just generally looking at how it affects my daily diet, my nutrition, so I can see which food specifically might affect me in what way. So both of us eat a bowl of porridge, we might have different responses to that bowl of porridge. It's really interesting to see what maybe spikes you more than other and what doesn't, So it gives you an interesting insight into those things as well.
Do you think? I mean, there are 2 points I really want to go into here, and they are related. So I think we'll start with the first one, which is you mentioned over tracking, and I wonder if you could sort of talk a little bit more about what you mean by that, the benefits and the positives and the negatives. Over tracking suggests clearly that you've gone too far with it, but just tell us a bit more about that first.
Yeah, so I think what I'm getting at with that is that if you find yourself becoming a little bit of a slave to the numbers, you're looking at how far and how fast, you're obsessing about kind of heart rates, and it's it becomes about the data rather than about the experience, and you're not really using the data in a positive way to work out, to match up with how you felt when you're actually doing the activity, and it sort of starts to creep into it. So you're constantly worried about when you're out on the run, when you're out doing your thing, that you're looking at the watch too much, or you're worrying about heart rate, and you forget that you're actually out here to enjoy yourself. At a certain level, we're not winning Olympic gold. Get to my age and it's like I'm 43. Those days are pretty much over. So I think it's nice to recognize when and how the data should be incorporated into your routine, and when you might be overstretching. So if you have negative feelings about a run because you feel like you haven't run well based on the data, that's and you find yourself having that repeated, that's not a great space to be. And in those moments, I think it's very helpful. I've challenged some of the watch brands to do it. I often will just put a sweatband or something over my watch. So I want to track, but I don't want to be able to see the numbers. And then I'll just go and run on feel. And I think that's a really interesting process. I think, from time to time, you should almost just do that as a part of your natural kind of training cycle. Go out and have some runs once a week, once a month, or whatever, where you just don't look at the numbers and you run to see how it feels. Look at the numbers when you get back if you want to, but in the moment, you want to just be enjoying it. So I think there's definitely something about, that feeling where we're all worried about whether or not we're being judged on Strava, or we're just basically trying to push perhaps a little bit harder than we need to when we're not elite athletes, and you don't want it to forget that we're doing this because it's supposed to be fun.
And Strava does lend itself to that as well, because if you are rewarded by its rewards, you only really get Strava rewards for going further or faster than you have done before. You get an extra little medal, you get this thing, and progress is great, but you make such a good point that you should be enjoying it. And you can also only absorb and benefit from the training you can recover from. So if you're constantly smashing it, you can't always be at a PB pace. Like that would be totally unhealthy training.
Yeah, I mean, just elites don't do it. I think there was so Molly Seidel got the bronze in the women's marathon. I think it was bronze. And I was looking at the stat. It was like 70% of her training is done much lower than than you would think. It's like easy pace, very easy pace. There's a small amount of training that is done at that kind of race pace or 5K pace and faster. So they're really using those top end sessions to sort of laser effect, but the rest of it is just actually out doing. And I think it's very easy to feel like you've got to go out and smash every run. And I guess the watches and the apps do that. Another example of this is, I think, it's become very popular is Peloton. I had the Peloton tread for a while, and it only, there's a leaderboard for people who don't know. There's a leaderboard on the side. So you're on the treadmill, you're running, and you get basically points as you run for your kind of effort intensity, essentially. And you rise up the leaderboard during a session. Now, every time you jump on that treadmill, it's telling you need to run hard in order to go up that leaderboard. And I actually, one of the bits of feedback in the review that I did was, that's fine, have those, but I want to see some other sessions where you reward me for staying in a lower heart rate zone. Or, so actually, because that's actually harder, I think. I'm guilty of it. I always go out and you look down, I'm running at, 150 beats per minute in the orange zone. I'm spending far too much time in that kind of no man's land. So, reward me for actually being more conscientious. But
isn't that one of the hardest things, like for the amateur athletes anywhere? And I think professionals, it's hard, but they have coaches forcing them to do it. Your hard needs to be really hard, but a lot less than we might think. And your slow needs to be a lot slower than you think. And the risk is we all end up in that no man's land in between, where we're not really getting the top end benefit, but we're not getting the baseline endurance either. You make a great point there that a treadmill, a connected app that rewarded you for actually getting that lower pace right would be brilliant, because that's one of the biggest problems for runners looking to progress anywhere, right?
Yeah. And reward my balance. I think there are, there are brands and there are products, watches that have become much better at helping you see your overall spread of training. So on some watches, it will break it down. It will show you in graphics whether or not you're spending too much time in that kind of no man's land and what your overall sort of week or month view is, and that you're getting the right balance, that you're getting enough recovery. But it's still done, I think that's still done in a very sort of sports sciencey way. It's not done in a sort of kudos, well done sort of way. There's not that, it's not giving you the dopamine hit of of a thumbs up when you get it right, or you're not getting likes for getting that balance right. But I think absolutely that's when you run your best. What's really interesting, Warren, as well, I think this year, whilst people have been locked away and not able to train in the same way, many people are going out and hitting PBs all over the place because they've perhaps had more downtime. And there's a lesson in there, I think, for sure.
Well, I mean, there's the volume of your sleep, your recovery, your nutrition, your prehab, your rehab. I mean, unbelievably, for someone who has been through the mill on Achilles trouble more times than I care to mention, I thought I knew every way to fix it. And the most recent time it raised its head, I went through all of my usual tricks. Nothing worked. I had to go back to the drawing board. I found a whole new foam roller move that was agony that I'd never found before. Absolutely sorted. So there's plenty of new knowledge out there to be had, which on the subject of being able to track even more, these super sapiens levels, this live real-time blood glucose monitoring, on the one hand, it sounds like science fiction. On the other hand, it sounds like a really easy path to over-tracking. But similarly, I bet heart rate monitors felt like that in 1995. Do you think it's something that could become that simple and useful? And how have your experiences been with it beyond the intrigue of the new tech?
I think I definitely think that heart rate monitor analogy is a good one. There's some question marks from scientists about how reliable it is, and actually as a non-diabetic, how useful it is. The argument being that your body responds naturally to whatever you put in it anyway, so it doesn't really make any difference. But I actually think, from my experience, it's one of the really interesting things that I hadn't quite expected. It made me think about what I was eating, and I think it brought a connection to food that I didn't really necessarily have that much before. And I think even that's something that I have been thinking about for a long time, but it was very different. I think for somebody who may never have thought of food almost as an athlete or in that way, with that kind of laser focus, this is a real window into you having that sort of tangible sort of response. You eat something, you see what happens in your body. And even if it's not 100% accurate, it's going to give you an indication. And so if you follow some of these people on, it's interesting to follow their feeds on social media or Twitter, you can see people having a wow moment that they've just eaten something that they thought was doing one thing, and actually it's had a different effect. And I don't really want to necessarily use the word sort of healthy or unhealthy, but someone put on there that they'd had some sushi. They hadn't expected to have a huge blood sugar spike after eating it, but obviously there's quite a lot of white rice in sushi, and so there's this
There's a
moment
lot
where
of sugar in effectively the binding, the sort of sesame sugar. What do you call it? The sort of oil that binds the rice. Yeah, that's going straight in, isn't it? It's kind of main vein stuff, but you wouldn't necessarily think that.
And really interestingly, actually, though, I'd stood at the UTMB, and I've literally just connected these dots just now in my head. At the UTMB, I stood 3 a.m. in the halfway aid station and watched all the elites come in and what they did at their aid stations with their kind of support group laying out the tables. I can't remember the runner, but lots of people put the usual stuff down. And then one table, one of the runners, it was literally just it was like a platter of sushi and a few other bits. And I'm thinking, I was like, that poor runner, I'm like that. Sort of everyone else has got all sorts. So there's just like a bit of sushi. So now maybe that's the thing. There's something in it. You need fast energy to a certain extent. Maybe that works for them. They've worked this out, and this would sort of show it. But what I think the technology really does is just it gives you that kind of a window into what's happening that you haven't had before. And I think in a world where it's very difficult to judge and trust on what you're being told and sold, you having that handle on it yourself, I think, is going to be really, really important, not just for people who want to run or ride fast. I think for people who don't want to get type 2 diabetes,
which I think is everyone.
Yeah. 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 It's a powerful tool, I think and anything that connects, but again, it has its place, and you have to use it. I use it intermittently, and I'll use it to test and see with things. I haven't let it rule my life, and I think that's with anything like this, there's a danger that you go too far and you let the tech govern, and it shouldn't. It's another stream of information from which you can make decisions about what you do.
And I think there's another element of this food tracking side. It's something that I was first introduced to when we were sort of doing content and stuff around the idea of fasting, fasted runs, increase your fat burning ability, the many positive health benefits of fasting. And Renee McGregor, an amazing nutritionist, she got in touch with us and said, look, all this stuff about fasting is great, but for a small proportion of people who are prone, whether they know it or otherwise, to eating disorders, fasting, a bit like exclusionary diets, veganism, whatever it may be, is a gateway, a way to take control of your food, and it can become very negative and hard to pull out of. And I think there's a similar risk with this, and people should be aware of it, that if you are really tracking your moves with food that closely and there is possibly a darker motive there, then be very aware of that. But for the vast majority of people, it just sounds like a really interesting experiment. And I think you have to learn how did you find it learning how to interpret the data? Because, okay, you have a blood sugar spike or you don't, but what do you then infer from the fact you did or you didn't?
Yeah, and I think that's in it. So I've used this in two contexts as well. The first time I used it, it was actually prior to Super Sapiens and Levels producing an app that was more based at performance. So I used it at a half marathon des Sables, and I used the Freestyle Libre sensor, and I used the diabetic app. So it wasn't, you didn't get any of the sort of reference points. The new apps very much are channeling the data and presenting it in a way that's aimed at people who are looking at performance. So the first time I used it, I was sort of on my own, just left to sort of work out what was going on. One really interesting anecdote about what I discovered and how I interpreted. I would look at the spikes. I came back off the long day on the half MDS, there was a windstorm, it was chaos. I'm in a one-man tent. I couldn't light a fire. I was busted up. It was dark. I crawled into the tent, and I felt kind of sick because I knew I'd sort of underfueled a bit. But I went to sleep, and I felt nauseous the entire night. I couldn't quite, but it was that kind of nausea where you don't want to eat. If you know, it's that, which is always, now I know it's a sign that that's when you absolutely should eat. You feel so sick that you can't, that you should. And in the morning, I woke up and I looked at the data, and I could see that my blood sugar levels were way, way low. So that told me the following day, it gave me, it's a little heads up that feeling now I recognize as being very, very low. And I had a hunch that I should eat, but now I definitely know that I should have eaten. So every time I feel like that now, I know to do something about it. So I've connected it with a feeling. Very important, you sort of doing that self-check, to connect the data. The new apps, I guess they present information in a slightly more performance-friendly way, but you still are left to interpret. They won't make recommendations, and it's about kind of feeling your way. You have to do the science a little bit on yourself. So you might have to go through a process for a month. If you're thinking about, one thing you might want to do is identify, what should I eat before I go and do my run in the morning? How am I going to get the energy right and have that even energy, even blood sugar levels throughout my run, no crashes, no spikes. Now, you basically just have to do the test. You have to do the science, go out, eat something, look at the data, cross-reference the data. It's not going to tell you, but it's about kind of constructing those sort of experimental moments, really. The other thing you can do is just whack it on for 2 weeks and eat freely, but my recommendation would be sort of even to take notes, even have a little mental diary or a proper diary where you're sort of, if this is a real thing you want to do performance, to work out, how did you feel after you'd eaten that and you came back from the run? How did you feel halfway through your run? If you felt like you bonked on the run, go back and look at the data, and you can start to sort of cross-reference. Again, I had that experience where got that kind of empty leg feeling, slightly wobbly on a run where I hadn't probably eaten enough. So it's a feeling that I'm kind of used to, but I was able to go back and look at the data. And again, sure as eggs, that my blood sugar levels had dropped. I ran through it very slowly and very sluggish and on the struggle bus, but eventually my body responded, released more sort of glycogen, and they returned. And I could see that in the data though. So, again, it's sort of adding a little layer to these real world feelings that you can start to go, oh, okay, I now understand what I was feeling when that happened a little more.
So it sounds like a key point of this, which is really where you started with it. And I loved your tip of a sweatband over the watch, because I can imagine the fear most people have, like run without a watch. I mean, I remember when that was a thing, and clearly before sports watches, it was very often a thing. But the sweatband, brilliant. But what I'm getting at here is that connection between, you have to connect your individual experiences and the data. So sometimes you have to go data and sometimes you have to go human, and you have to be able to cross the two. When you combine the two, you get more out of them. Is that the right sort of takeaway?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And there's no replacement for how you can't replace how you felt, but it's great to have something that might give you an extra pointer as to why that might be, or to cement it and say, yes, you were feeling like that. You weren't just being rubbish today. There's a reason that sort of 6 miles in you felt like bins. There's more and more of this stuff. It goes beyond food as well. I think there's I tested out another product called Core. This is very, very deep and very, very performance. It's probably not going to be for everyone, but it's it's not a skin temperature. It's like a core body temperature monitor. So it doesn't measure skin temperature. It measures core body temperature. There's a big difference. One of them is much more kind of valuable in terms of what's going on. Skin temperature, I think, can be affected by other external factors. But it gives you this other layer of heart rate. If you've gone out and run in incredible heat, yes, it's hot, so it's going to be harder, but it gives you some concrete data to back it up. So what you're getting is there's lots of those devices just sort of layering in these kind of streams of information that add context to things, and I think that's very, very helpful. But I love the idea, I sometimes I'll go out and little challenges, like I'll go and see if can I run 6 miles? How close can I get to run 6 miles without knowing if I've run 6 miles? And there's always little tests which they're kind of fun to do, and you'd be surprised after all the years of doing it. If you've been running, you're pretty good quite often at knowing distances, at knowing what your heart rate is, and the more you can do that, I think the better.
And that sort of it gamifies the switch off as well. How consistent can I be on my regular loop without looking at my watch? How consistent can I be in my heart rate zones without looking at my watch? So those are great little games. A quick word from our sponsors: the most excellent, most wonderful, most natural 33 Fuel Natural Sports Nutrition. Just remember, when you're looking for the best possible nutrition products for your performance, your health, and your well-being, get yourselves over to 33fuel.com. And now, let's get back to the show. With this connectivity, do you have any concerns or advice around the additional amount of Bluetooth, Wi-Fi that people are increasingly absorbing themselves with, and in many cases attaching to their body? Because obviously you would go through a lot of this. Have you got any thoughts on that? Is that something you're comfortable with? Is there anything people should be aware of with it?
In all honesty, it's not something that I ever sort of consider. I'm sort of a paid up member of the, I test watches for a living. So, in all honesty, I'm out there with more Bluetooth than anybody. I've sometimes got 3 watches on. I'll have a chest strap. I've got, 4 sensors. I've got foot pods. Like, we'll know, basically in 10 years time, right? Because I'll let you know. I remember, because I'm doing more of this than anyone.
There was an very early sleep monitoring product, really ahead of its time, called a Zeo. Doesn't exist anymore, and that involves strapping a pretty large Bluetooth sensor to your head overnight, and I believe it was down to the fact that there was some confusion over whether that was actually a good idea given the technology at the time, which I think was part of the reason that it maybe didn't continue. But the vast proliferation of it since couldn't have happened otherwise. Yeah. But I think maybe the other thing about that app, and I'd like to know this from you actually, because the problem with that app, I was interested to monitor my sleep and looking at it. I was investigating polyphasic sleep as just an experiment, really. Looking at the time, I think, for gains at the UTMB, because I figured I was going to need to sleep for 20 minutes at some point, and it just sort of all went from there. But this thing was such a pain to set up, pair. It just stressed me out so much every night. It ruined my sleep on its own before I'd even got it on. How do you find that now with all these devices? Do you have a limit? I mean, are you so plugged in, for want of a better word, to them that, like, the setup, the unboxing, the setup, the preparation, the pairing is all pretty seamless now? How is that experience now? And is it all sort of making your running better?
I mean, you definitely get, I've tested so many products that I definitely get quicker at doing the setup. I'm not going to lie, there are still products that come in that you put aside, you go, well, that's a weekend job. When I've got time to sit down and do it. The really good products, though, now make it very simple. And then when we're testing something, that's the first thing you look for. Is like, if I've had to get the manual out, I'm like, that's a bad mark straight away. I don't really care what data you're going to be sending me. I don't want to have to get into all of that. And absolutely, your point is a really valid one about this technology, particularly in and around your kind of sleep environment. It's no good if it's stressing you and having a detrimental effect. It goes back to the point about running. If the data is killing your enjoyment of running, get rid of the data. Go and enjoy the running. And I've used quite a lot of kind of sleep trackers. It's annoying. Sometimes you'll wake up and if something hasn't tracked your sleep in the morning, you sort of start the day with, it's a bit frustrating because I haven't got that data. And particularly in my job, because I need the data to also to write, right? So there are some things that you go through the process. I've been out on runs where I've been trying to get a piece of data out of a watch and it hasn't recorded it on 4 different runs. I've been out like 4 times in the day, and it's a nightmare. So you need to, you want stuff that's going to the best tech fits seamlessly in the background, delivers you data without interruption and without affecting your overall enjoyment of whatever it is that you're doing, or impacting what you're doing. Sleep tracking is a brilliant example of something where if you get too caught up in it, it will have there's studies that show it will have a negative connotation. It'll actually negatively impact your sleep. I've got to actually use a mat that goes under the mattress that it's worked perfectly for me. It tracks in the background. I don't really know it's there. And in the morning I get some data. Is, an approximation of what has actually happened. I never look at it and particularly sort of see it as being 100% accurate. I've also been using another product which I'm wearing at the moment, which is called an Aura Ring. It tracks sleep and heart rate variability, but again, you can wear it. It sort of almost disappears in the background. You forget you're wearing it, and you can go and have a look at the data. Those are the things that I definitely prefer. That's something that when I'm reviewing something in high marks, go to things that don't interrupt and don't frustrate and annoy.
Needs to be simple and, yeah, you're right, adding value without unnecessarily tripping you up with it. And it seems at the other end of the developments, on the one hand, we have high tech taking us deeper and deeper into the world of sci-fi. Yet, in terms of people's running, you're seeing a lot more people figuring out their own challenges, FKTs, fastest known times, rather than the big organized events, which feels like a move in the opposite direction, to sort of embrace nature, your own nature in terms of what you want to do, to embrace freedom to do any challenge, to embrace the randomness of it all, rather than the very, by comparison, prescribed nature of a fixed event. It's this date, it's this long, this is what's happening, these are the winning times, off you go.
Yeah, and I think there's a place for both of these things. And I think actually one of the FKT and the adventure sort of self-powered stuff maybe comes with your running age growing and your confidence and your own sort of experience builds. And I definitely think for beginner runners, there's absolutely a place that there's a comfort in knowing you're going to have aid stations where you're given the things that you need to get round, or you've got a specific date in the calendar to work towards. You might have friends and family there to watch you. You've got the crowds. You've got all of that wrapped up. It's a really nice, safe place to go and enjoy your running. It's why parkrun's so popular. It's that community. There's all of that. There's a comfort to that. But I, particularly kind of through lockdown, and I sort of discovered that I think for myself, when I go and race, I feel a certain amount of pressure that comes with those that I don't find when I'm going to do something on my own. So and I've spoken to a lot of other runners about this, where I'm always either chasing the person in front for no particular reason, because I don't know when they started, I'm not necessarily faster, I'm not going to win anything, or I'm feeling like the person behind me is chasing me. And on ultras, it creates this sort of feeling of constant need to progress at a certain pace to get to the aid stations. It's this constant forward motion feeling. And I don't get my head up enough and look around and enjoy what I'm doing. The number of times I've been out, 40 miles deep into something, suffering a fair amount, and thought I should come back and do this on my own over 2 days, enjoy being here, And after a while, you're thinking that in races, you just go, oh, actually, I'll do that. and it's nice, there's a liberation to it. If you don't, you still want to get from start to finish. You're still running the same distance, but you can stop on a log and enjoy the view and eat something and just go again when you want to. And there's about sort of taking off that pressure I really have sort of fallen in love with. Now, FKTs, I guess, is a slightly different version of that, where you are chasing a time, but if you're smart, you'll just find an FKT that someone's gone really slow. I did one with a couple of mates back along, and we knew the time we were able to run at a pace where we could stop for ice creams or whatever. We'd stop for drinks, and it was an enjoyable experience. And yeah, there's something nice and liberating about being able to have what you need in your pack, And it's helped me to discover this feeling like I've now got it down where I can put pretty much everything I need to survive for a couple of days in a backpack on my back, and I can run 70 miles over 2 days, camp, and I now know I can go anywhere. As long as I can restock the food in my bag, I can get up and run the next day. I can go anywhere. And it's a wonderful feeling, and a very different one to doing the London Marathon. Different. They're both, I enjoyed the London Marathon, but they're different. I can see more people during lockdown maybe had the chance to experience that because there were no races. And I would totally recommend it. If you've not done it, it doesn't have to be 40 miles, it could be 10, but just go somewhere, on your own and have that experience where you maybe slow down a bit, maybe give yourself the permission to stop and enjoy the things that you're passing through. That's me waxing lyrical about getting all philosophical in my running old age.
But it is the romance of it and the beauty of it. And on the one hand, I love the point there that a race does take away a lot of the admin and uncertainty, whether it's an ultra that's going to allow you to simply focus on running and nothing else, and being in a wild landscape through a period of time, whether it's a fixed race, park run, London Marathon, whatever. You have that date, you have that accountability, but the freedom you talk about, that is the romance of running. And frankly, I did not get into ultra marathons because I was so mad about the running. I was so mad about the experience and the adventure. The running was simply the gateway that took me there. And I think, clearly we share a similar value around that. But to your point about freedom there, I have a friend who is in counterterrorism, and when he found out about ultra running, his first reaction was those people would be impossible to track. And unless, of course, you're wearing 100 devices, which obviously, to our previous conversation, we all are. But when you have a range on foot of 100 miles over 48 hours, you could literally be anywhere. You don't have to follow roads, trains, go through any cameras. You don't have to use a credit card, anything like that. Clearly, that would be a dodgy way to use the freedom of running. But the freedom that with a small pack on your back, you can just go wherever you like, that's amazing.
Yeah, and it's good fun. It's good fun, and it's amazing some of the kit that I've got down to the pack is about 5.5 kilos, my one at the moment. And that includes a little sleeping mattress, a bivy sack. So it's like basically a waterproof wrap for your sleeping bag, but you sleep up with your face under the stars. It has a really lightweight sleeping bag, and then whatever fuel I would need. But so for 5.5 kilos, it's runnable, and you can go anywhere, as long as and then there's the whole wild camping thing. You can pretty much drop and where you get tired, wake up the next morning and go again. And it's I did a loop around the Isle of Wight in 2 days with a friend, so 70 miles, and we ran 40, got tired, stopped, slept, woke up the next day and did the final 30. And it was just it felt like a holiday for 2 weeks, just in 2 days. So it's and again, you don't, even on that one though, I did think we should probably have done this over 7 days and we could have had a beer.
So you've mentioned something that are really interesting, the concept of running age. Now, I have a rough idea what this might be. The clue's probably in the name, but I'd far rather actually know for real. So I think it relates to a lot of the things that we've been talking about. Can you just sort of tell us a bit more about what that concept is?
Yeah, so as I kind of understand it, I can't claim credit for it. It's actually, it's sort of a thing that I came across there's a book by Richard Asquith called Running Free. Now, Richard's kind of an old school runner, but it sort of talks about going through the process. It's kind of a riff off, Shakespeare's sort of 7 Ages of Man, where you sort of go through this different sort of an evolution of your kind of running, where you start out and you're new to it, and you're concentrating on going fast and chasing times and chasing PBs and being better and faster and performance and improving it. And you'll almost ignore everything that's going on around you. And it's all about the running fast. So it's all about the watches and the data and all of those things. And it's sort of, as you go through this, maybe you'll hit, at some point you might hit your kind of peak where you've reached your kind of fastest time. And eventually, as you go through these ages and stages, your mind sort of opens up a little bit more. where it becomes less about chasing fast times, and you realize that the real enjoyment of running perhaps is in looking at what's around you and moving more slowly through the terrain and through the things that you're looking at. But it's very much sort of tied into, you almost have to have gone through these early stages first. It's a metamorphosis. It's not, you can't necessarily easily leap from one to the other, necessarily. I mean, you can a bit, but there's a sort of a natural progression. And I think as you've run more miles, or you've done more races, and you've ticked the PB boxes, you start to try and find something a little bit more out of your running. Life maybe gets a little more complicated. You might be slightly older, you might have a family, you might not be able to go and do so much or dedicate so much time to training in order to be as quick as you would like. Injuries, all these things start to sort of play a role in they change maybe how you think about the time that you have got to spend when you're going out to do it. And then you look back and you think, well, was I enjoying all of those, really fast, 10Ks that I had to run, where I was trying to improve my marathon time and making myself feel sick, or doing those kind of threshold interval sessions where you're doing 20 miles with a big block in the middle where you've got to run to her? The answer is, at the time, you probably weren't enjoying them. Afterwards, you may have done. You'll certainly have enjoyed maybe getting the time that you got in the marathon, and I still love doing that stuff. But I think as you reach the I guess it's not an actual link to your age, but it's linked to how long you've been running, perhaps, that you start to look in these other places. So your running experience starts to change what you want to get out of it.
And I think there's an element as well that as you go through that process, the more comfortable you are with running, both physically and mentally, then the more you are able to look at the other things. There's a concept I came across in motorcycle racing, which was the idea of any racer has $10 of attention. Now, if you think about someone learning, let's transpose it to cars, more people have that experience. You're learning to drive a car. Well, if you've got $10 of attention, $9.50 is being spent on like pulling away without stalling, which leaves you 50 cents for everything else you need to do. And that's the same when you start running. Your $10 of attention is really spent up on the process of doing it. But as your running age increases, then the process of getting ready, going out for a run, being ready, knowing your body's okay, having the right things with you, is kind of not even a dollar. Leaves you $9 to spend on the rest. And that can really be the experience, which comes back into what you were talking about, more of those freestyle events, pick your own route, do your own thing.
Yeah, confidence. You know that pair of shorts is going to work for you. It takes out some of the fear. I can still remember the morning of my first marathon, which was Paris back in 2009. I was in a room with a really experienced runner, and he's just doing his thing. And I'm looking at him sort of saying, are you going to, what do I have to do? Like, I don't, where do I put this? I literally didn't have a clue about how this was going to go for the day. And it's a very nervous, it's quite an intense moment, because you just have no clue what happens after 3 hours of running, because I'd never gone that far. I didn't know how we're going to get to the start, all these different things. And yeah, as you're right, as you build up that knowledge, I now know where to put the Vaseline, or in fact, I don't use Vaseline. I've got another product which I'd swear by, which, I know that my nipples won't chafe, so I don't have to worry about that anymore.
You don't have to worry about not wearing a white shirt.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'm not going to be. Yeah, I think that's one of those lessons that you learn very quickly. Once you do that once, and then you don't do it again. But it's amazing. That's what I sort of meant. You can't necessarily skip the process, because the part of the fun of it is discovering these things, and about layering on the learning and educating yourself to work out, to make those mistakes. I guess you can shortcut some of them, and it's interesting to take other people's knowledge and apply it so you don't make terrible mistakes. But it's also fun to go and have some of the discomfort and come back and fix it, and next time not to have it, because you get all these positive kind of feedback loops when you do the same distance or the same thing, and you pass that moment that was difficult the time before, and you cruise it, and you're like another example of this is, and I still blame you for this to this day, is in the Lavaredo, which I've done. I'm going to bring it up because I've done it twice, because we sat in a cafe and had a coffee after I'd done the MDS, and you said to me, "This is the most amazing race. You have to do it. It's beautiful. It's stunning. Like it's fun." So I'm like, went and signed up for it almost immediately after you told me that, and then and then I was halfway up the biggest climb in the Lavaredo, wanting someone to shoot me. But I failed. I didn't complete it. Second year, I went back and I did it again. And there were so many things that I learned from the first race that every single aid station that I moved through, I did sort of the checks, and I was like, I'm doing so much better, and I feel so much better. It was just very, very positive to move through that process. I still didn't finish it though, so that's on you.
I can only apologise, but it's beautiful, and you know, the last bit's in the dark anyway, unless you're professional. So you didn't miss any of the views. You're all right.
Yeah, but it's nice. It was a nice, you know, and I will go back and complete it again. But I'll when I do, it will be even better because I've had the struggle, you know, I think.
Well, I had a similar journey with the UTMB before I completed that one, and took some major lumps along the way. And one of the other things that I know we wanted to talk about was aid stations, and you know, how to handle them, how to work out what you should be eating, and maybe this relates to running age too, because I remember a very early one where an elite UTMB runner, the first time I went and ran it, when I was blatantly a very, very long way out of my depth. I asked him about nutrition, and at the time I knew like virtually nothing about it. And he said, "I just listen to my body. I give it what it needs." And I was in a hole at some point in the middle of the night in an aid station. I was like, okay, what does my body want? And my body said coffee and chocolate. So I ate coffee and chocolate, and then I was sick. And it's like, well, clearly I don't know what my body wants yet. I am not connected in this Zen-like way he was then between what my body thought the signals it was giving out and what I then did for it. Obviously that comes with time. And I'd like to say, clearly I've learned a lot more about nutrition since that particular time, a long time ago. But what is your take on that, you know, managing the aid station experience in whatever race you may be in?
Yeah, I've made terrible mistakes. You know, I've underfueled, I've been horribly nauseous. It's the worst possible thing as well. I think of any feeling, give me all the fatigue you like, give me, you know, impact injuries, give me all of that stuff. But the minute my stomach goes, I slow right down and I'm in bits. Mentally, my game goes as well. That's the moment I want someone to spill me into a taxi and give me a cuddle. It's like, and you do learn, like you have to learn over time, and you have to listen, you have to be able to tune in. And I find this a really fascinating thing, because my early approach was very almost sort of scientific. It's very much like I go with the watches and the data, and I'm trying to work out what works. I'm over prepared, and I overthink things. I'll carry quite a lot of options in my backpack of fuel. And then I'd run into an aid station, and I'd see, with quite a lot of technical food, if you want to call it that, and then I'd see these sort of French guys bust up to a table and maybe just eat salami and cheese or whatever they were eating. And I'd be like, I don't even know how they're doing that. Years later, having been through a lot of processes, I now understand what they're doing. I understand how they're eating. Partly I have enabled my body to be used to eating certain things when I run, but I'm smarter about fueling myself from a mixture of what's in my backpack and what's available on the aid station. So I've got this bedrock of things that I know work for me, that are based on proper sort of guided kind of latest sort of scientific nutritional thinking about how much I should be eating and when. And then I've also got those moments like you discussed, that when I go into an aid station and all of a sudden my body now says, I need this, I'm ready to adapt and pick up something else. And again, it's, you know, I'm all about these sort of combined approaches where you can swing, you can go to both. You've got both levers to pull, because there are times you just don't expect it. Your body can feel different on some days where the things in your pack might not any longer do the trick, and you need to go somewhere. One thing I did, I ran the Thames Path with two fellow runners. We did it in 3 days. It was like 190 miles in 3 days. We did 70 miles on day one, and then on day two, very hard to get going again, and I was in bits. for some reason, we stopped at cafes along the way, and this is not, I wouldn't recommend this for everyone, but I had a ham and cheese toasty. I had a craving for it, and a black coffee, and it worked. On that day, it worked. It did a combination of things, which it made me mentally feel good. It was a nice comfort thing to do. It kind of filled me up, and it gave me energy. It was warm. The coffee picked me up, and I was able to. We weren't running very fast. We were moving quite slowly, so I was able just to sort of amble out of there and get moving again. It clearly gave me a punch of something that I was lacking in a big way, and it worked. I would never have go back sort of 6 or 7 years. There's no way I would have dreamed of putting that anywhere near my face during any kind of run. But I knew that I could. I knew there was, you approach it with the right way. I knew that it would do the trick. So yeah, my recommendation with all of this is, it's trial and error. Obviously, is what there's a main sort of tip, but be precise. I think in understanding what the quantities that your body might need to fuel with. Have your go-tos, but also be ready to tune in and listen and get to know the signals from your body, so that when the time comes, you're able to adapt and you are making good decisions.
It's an interesting point you make there about the different food types, and it so mirrors the journey that I had, that I think a lot of people have gone through, but that actually became the stepping off point for what is now 33 Fuel. Was similar to you. And as I was a journalist at the time, and there weren't really many people who could run ultras and who were writing about them. And I was given a lot of nutrition products, and had a lot of problems, because standard nutrition products we know, they don't really agree with your stomach. You have all these things. But I thought it's what I was meant to do. So, I saw people eating seeds and nuts and stuff, and I had these experiences where I was like, what are you doing? A bit like your reaction with the guys coming into the aid station. But after chucking all this stuff away, I was like, okay, what do I like? And I went with cheese sandwiches and buttered malt loaf and water. And I went better than I ever had done on any sort of original sports nutrition product over distance. And at that point, I was like, I think there might be something in this food stuff. I think there's something to go there. But having that open mind to, sports nutrition is your sports nutrition, but your diet is also your sports nutrition. Therefore, kind of everything you eat is fueling you on race day. The thing you ate last week is going to improve or not improve your race. The thing you eat in the moment is going to improve or improve. But maybe the bridge too far, and you may have found this at one of the Lavaredo ultra trail aid stations. They serve beer, which I definitely gave that one a miss. Apparently, runners in the Tyrol area do have a bit of beer for electrolytes. It's not uncommon there. But if you're not used to it, I heard from another guy, a Dutch guy, who'd never had beer when he ran normally. He said, yeah, absolutely ruined his race. His legs turned to rubber. So beer might be a step too far.
Yeah, I wouldn't be doing that. I'm not into. I did come upon those aid stations. I made it that far into the race, and at that point, the sight of beer just made me even more angry. But I think your point about that kind of one other thing that I think is really important, and it's totally my approach to my life actually, and my nutrition, is that I think good nutrition shouldn't stop at the start line. It's not about, you don't try and eat well to be healthy and fuel your training, and then get to the start line and then just put whatever in. I don't kind of agree with that. I don't go with that. I try and find, I guess, a real food approach to what I eat. And I think it's really interesting that there was a period of time when I thought I knew better than some of those, gnarly looking mountain runners who were eating those foods, because I had the special new product that they didn't have. So I was going to do better than them. And I've quickly realized that that's not necessarily the case. Some of these products work at certain times. I ran the MDS fueled on various different things. One of them was a 33 fuel shake. The other was a product called UCAN, which is kind of a slow release sort of liquid fuel powder, which isn't particularly kind of natural, real food in any way. The combination of those two things at that time kind of worked with me, but it was also with the premise of trying to retain this kind of even blood sugar levels, energy levels, trying to and that's one of the things that UCAN does. It has this kind of consistent, but it's about kind of that balance is my approach. You want to have things that just make you feel the energy is there when you need it, and interestingly, just enjoy it. There's nothing better than reaching into your bag for something that when you're really feeling like you need that hit of fuel, that you go, yeah, actually, I'm going to really enjoy cracking that down and taking a walk up this big mountain. There's nothing worse than pouring something into a bottle and thinking, Christ, have I got now got to drink that? Otherwise, I'm not going to get anywhere. So yeah, that's my, like you said, things you've got to look for things that you like and enjoy. For sure.
And I guess that comes back to, it's part of that aid station thing, that listen to your body. Everything you were saying earlier about the over tracking, the stepping away, the matching it. You need to be listening to your body and starting to understand those, whether it be hunger, exhaustion, desire for certain foods, fatigue. You need to be able to gradually, and as your running age increases, you'll get even better at doing it. The more conscious you are of it, the better you get at doing it. But that skill sounds like it underpins everything, and it has certainly been a key driver and motivator for you.
Yeah, and then I'll take it right back to the blood glucose monitor, because and back to that being in the tent, feeling sick at 4 a.m. at the half MDS, not being able to eat. I now know that's a feeling. I was having the opposite sensation. My brain is telling me don't eat. What my body actually needed was to eat. I now recognize that feeling and I can tune into it. And the technology has helped me get to that point. So any ways that you can find to kind of decode what your body is telling you in that way, and then you've tried and tested, it's brilliant, because things will go wrong and you're not going to feel good all the time, but knowing how to respond is just infinitely better than not. Nothing worse than being stuck, not knowing how to get rid of that horrible feeling of nausea or whatever it is that's not happening for you when you've got 40 miles still to run.
And so for people who want more, as they all should, of more Kieran Alger in their life, more of your wisdom, and more of your, whether it be your reviews, your tech. I mean, I know you're across so many different outlets these days, but you also have your own channels too. So where are the best places for people to be connecting with you?
Yeah, so one of the best places will be on YouTube. So we've got a YouTube channel called The Run Testers. There's 4 runners who are testing all kinds of kit, giving 4 different runners' view on everything. So, it's interesting because not everything works for everyone. So you get a good kind of sort of total kind of view on what we do. I'm also on Instagram at ManVMiles, and you'll probably come across me if you search for best this, that, and the other in running, like headphones. Search for best headphones, best gels, best running shoes, any of the other stuff. At some point in the Google results, you'll find something written by me.
And just as an aside there, one of the rare things that I love about the Run Testers, and I think it's possibly one of the reasons that we've connected strongly over the years, is you genuinely have and the team a strong sense of, actually truthfully telling your experiences rather than being clouded, whether it be by a PR obligation or anything else like that. There's a real championing of the independence there, but it's never this preachy righteousness about it. It's great content, but it comes from the heart, and you're saying what you're saying it as you found it. And that isn't everywhere these days, particularly across many social channels. It's a rare thing. And I think that sort of level of trust that you can give people is really high quality. So I do applaud that.
Yeah, thanks. That's something that we've definitely tried to build in a lot. And it's something that, it's brilliant that there's 4 of us, because we don't always agree. So we can still be ourselves, One shoe that works for Nick, my fellow run tester, might not work for me. But we'll definitely aim to we're trying to help people find stuff that they can use and improve their running. So that's basically our mission, is we enjoy it. We've been through the experience. We get to try this kit. So we're just trying to pass on some of that knowledge so they're making good decisions.
And with the combined running age between the 4 of you of what, 120, there's oodles of wisdom to go there.
Exactly. We're not going to cap. We're not. I think I'm giving the heaviest load of all of that, but in terms of the age, probably more than the experience. For
Uh, well, Kieran, look, thank you so much for taking the time out to share all of that brilliant knowledge and for coming on the show. Great to see you again.
no, no. Thank you very much for having me on. It's been a pleasure to chat.
Kieran Alger, ladies and gentlemen, give that man a great big hand. Hope you enjoyed that one. All of the relevant links will be in the show notes below. And all that's left to say from me is do not forget that when you want the finest natural sports nutrition in the world, do get yourself over to 33fuel.com. Thank you so much for joining me on this show today, and I look forward to your company very much on the next one.